Hey everybody. I wanted to do a video real quick about Amendment 1 since today is the last day to vote on Amendment 1 and it's the actual voting day. There's going to be a lot of people voting. So essentially, my husband and I, mostly my husband, because I just had knee surgery, have been standing out in front of polling places with signs telling people to vote against Amendment 1. For those of you who are unaware of what Amendment 1 is, it essentially says that the only union that we recognize legally in North Carolina is a union between a marriage between one man and one woman. Um, this does not just ban gay marriage. Gay marriage is already banned in North Carolina. What it does is ban um, any kind of same-sex union, any kind of domestic partnership, gay or straight. Essentially, it does a lot of harm. Uh, and there are some arguments for it, and I'm going to go through those real quick. A lot of these that I heard face to face from people who opposed me while I was um, protesting the amendment, or while my husband was protesting the amendment. And I just wanted to go through some of those real quick. So these come from actual people who support the amendment, okay? The first one that I heard was that marriage is God's law, that marriage was created by the Christian God, and therefore it should be defined by Christians, and therefore it should be defined in a specific way. Well, obviously that's false for a few reasons. First of all, it's your opinion because everybody has different religions, and almost every religion has different marriage rites and rituals, and many of those are older than Christianity or Judaism. So to suggest that marriage is kind of patented by your deity is ridiculous. Secondly, the idea that you can institute a religious law into government is illegal. We have something called the separation of church and state in this country. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So, and before people get up to a tiffy and say, oh, well, that doesn't apply to the states, yes, it does. The 14th Amendment has an incorporation clause that says that essentially state laws and local laws cannot override the federal government. So, yes, it does apply to states and local government. Anyway, so that reason right off the bat, not a good reason to vote for this amendment. And honestly, for a lot of the people who are voting for this amendment for religious reasons, you are setting up a wonderful precedent to get it overturned in a higher court. um, Second reason that I've heard is that essentially allowing gay people to marry would would essentially encourage the people to be gay, and therefore essentially the human race would eventually die out because no one would have children. Uh, that argument is ridiculous on its face for many reasons. First of all, homosexuality is not a choice. People are born homosexual. I'm not suggesting that it's genetic because there's no proof that it's actually genetic. I think it's actually a combination of genetic and environmental factors in the womb. But you know, it has not yet been shown exactly how it's inborn. However, we can show that homosexuality is not a choice. It cannot be prayed away, and it is not a choice. So, essentially, the idea that one law can encourage people to be gay is ridiculous. It's not factual. Secondly, homosexual marriages, same-sex marriages, have children in many different ways. For lesbian couples, they have in vitro for fertilization. For gay couples, for gay men, they have surrogacy. And both types of same-sex couples do adopt children on large scale levels. So especially where it's legal. So it's ridiculous to assume that the human race is going to die out as a result of this amendment. It just doesn't make any sense. Um, let's see. What was another one? Another one was that somehow, gay people having children is harmful to the children, which there's no evidence of that. Been no evidence shown that gay marriage, that families with who are same-sex parents are any more or less effective than single parents or heterosexual parents. There's been a lot of evidence to suggest that it's a pretty good upbringing, much better than a group home, you know. It's ridiculous. But anyway, um, there's been some others, but those are the main ones. Another one that I wanted to mention real quick, which is very not factual, was that somebody said that pastors would be forced to marry gay same-sex couples. That's not true. I'll tell you why. Religions in this country can discriminate. They are allowed to discriminate on the basis of gender, on the basis of race, and of course on the basis of sexual orientation. And so that means that a religion can choose to disclude you from a service. They can tell you to leave the church. They can excommunicate you, and they can refuse to perform any type of sacrament or ceremony on you, and that includes gay people. You know, just ask the Jehovah's Witness. They love to excommunicate people. Even Mormons excommunicate people too. It's very common in those churches, and they can do it on any basis. On any basis, if they don't like your lifestyle, they can do it. And so, essentially, there is no evidence whatsoever that any pastor will ever be forced to marry somebody that he doesn't want. Because right now, a pastor can refuse to marry people if they're interracial. He can refuse to marry people if he doesn't like the looks of them. Okay? So it doesn't matter. It is a non-issue. Some people want to bring up the fact that a case in Hawaii, which somebody quoted to me and said that there was a pastor in Hawaii or a church in Hawaii that was forced to marry a gay couple. That's not true. On the National Organization for Marriage's website, it lists that case, and it says that it was not about the couple getting married by that church. It was about the church that had some land that it rented, and it refused to rent the land to the same-sex couple. That's a completely different issue because it doesn't have to do with religious beliefs or religious ceremony. It has to do simply with a piece of land that they rent out and make money off of. So, if you don't want to um, have to abide by state and federal laws when it comes to same-sex marriage and other things as well, any kind of discrimination, then don't incorporate what you're doing. If you incorporate, one of the laws of incorporation in every state is that you agree to abide by their laws and rules. If you keep your church private, you don't have to do that. So in other words, if you rented that land and it was a private thing and you didn't make much money off of it, so you never bothered to incorporate it, then you can discriminate against anybody you want because it's private. It's not incorporated. And so, yeah, you can choose to discriminate that. But because they chose to get a tax break off that land, they chose to abide by um, state and federal law. So they chose to make that decision, and then they refused to follow through with it. That's what that law was about. So for those of you who want to bring up that something happened in Hawaii, it's bull. Okay, I've looked it up. And I looked it up on the National Organization for Marriage's website. Yeah. They tried to misconstrue it to what it was, but if you read the whole story, you're like, oh, it's about renting a piece of land, you know. So, so anyway, uh, those are the arguments that I've heard so far to vote for this amendment. Um, Now, of course, the ones to vote against it are very clear. Some of them were very well articulated by Bill Clinton. But, let's just lay them out. Okay, first of all, we've already mentioned that this amendment is unconstitutional. And if you go against the Constitution, I personally think that makes you pretty much un-American, you know? I mean, we hold our Constitution to be pretty high in this country. And if you don't want to abide by it, GTFO, that's the way I see it, GTFO. And um, the second one is obviously that this doesn't just involve gay marriage. It also involves domestic partnerships of straight people. In certain cities, like Chapel Hill and other places, there are domestic partnership laws. So those people can register as domestic partners in those cities, and at their jobs then, their domestic partner can collect benefits. If that person gets sick, they can go see them in the hospital and stuff like that because they are domestic partners. It's essentially the most basic laws that are afforded to people who are married, but without actually getting married. There's a few reasons why people may need to do this, because a lot of people say, well, domestic partnerships aren't needed. If they're straight, why don't they just go get married? It's not that simple, okay? If your husband is missing in action, if your husband simply, or I should say, if your husband or wife um, went off and abandoned you, and just left, you don't know where he or she is, um, if you have bad credit, these are 3 reasons why you may want a domestic partnership instead of a marriage, okay? First of all, for a lot of people whose husbands die or wives die, a lot of times the will constitute that you lose certain benefits if you remarry. So a lot of times people don't want to remarry because of those benefits. You may go have a religious service, and then on the federal, on the government level, you just go register for a domestic partnership. Okay. The second thing would be, of course, if one person has really bad credit, say you went through school and you have a whole crap load of student loans, and you haven't been able to pay those off yet, right? So you have $100,000 of the student loans, and the person that you love and want to marry has perfect credit, okay? In North Carolina, guess what happens if you get married? Damn, you go down together, okay? You get, as Barack Obama said when he and his wife got married, they got poor together, okay? So a lot of times people who with really bad credit have a reason to hold off on getting married until they improve their credit, because they don't want the credit of their spouse to go down. It affects being able to find a place to live, or their future spouse, I should say. They It affects, being able to find a place to live, getting a car, sometimes even getting a job, So you may not want to marry that person because it'll hurt you financially. So once again, you go have a spiritual ceremony and then you get a domestic partnership. These are several reasons why people get domestic partnerships. Now, say there's children involved in this relationship, either from a previous relationship, or something like that. So in other words, the person that you want to marry has kids from their previous relationship, okay? But you want to cover those kids on your insurance. Under a domestic partnership, you can. But this law would nullify domestic partnerships, and thus the kids, and your future spouse would lose their insurance. Yeah, that sucks. Because we don't want kids out of health insurance, do we? But this law does exactly that. A lot of people don't understand how that's possible. I had one lady say, "This law does not involve private contract. It does not involve private contracts. Domestic partnership is not a private contract. It's done by the city, so it's not a private contract. And yes, it would be nullified." So many stupid arguments. I'm telling you. It, you know, Essentially, another thing that I wanted to mention too was that under the domestic violence laws in North Carolina, it could hurt victims of domestic violence, kids and women, because if they're not considered a domestic partner at the basic level, then those people could not be considered to be domestic offenders, and therefore certain protections like restraining orders and other protections that come to people when they're victims of domestic violence wouldn't help those people. And so victims of domestic violence would be affected by this law as well. I just wanted to lay it out all because I've heard the headline version of all the arguments to vote against this, um, but nobody's really gotten into detail. I also there was a pastor that was on TV yesterday, and he said something that I liked a lot, and that was that the Constitution itself is not meant to restrict laws. It's meant to kind of show what our rights are, not to exclude rights. And so, I don't think that we should get into the business of excluding people's rights in the Constitution. I also think that it's not right for people to vote on the rights of others. The tyranny of the majority affecting the rights of the minority. Heard that before? What's next? Are they gonna, if they're gonna vote on marriage and say that it's all biblical, are they gonna say that pagan marriages are illegal? What's next? It's a slippery slope, isn't it? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I rambled a little bit, but I think that I laid it all out for you guys so that you can see that there's really no logical reason to vote for this amendment. You need to vote against. When you get up there and you vote, vote against. And encourage your friends. If you don't live in North Carolina, but you know people who live in North Carolina, tell them to vote against. Even if they're not registered to vote, you can register to vote today in North Carolina. Just bring a driver's license, and if it's got your correct address. If your driver's license doesn't have your correct address, bring some piece of mail like your electric bill, bring your Duke Power bill or whatever, and they'll get you set up, okay? You need to vote against. It's very clear. Brightest blessings, everyone.